we had mentioned before we got on this call two companies I worked at. One was NetGeo, the other was NextTag, which unfortunately two companies that share a lot of the same letters, so it makes it sometimes confusing. But NetGeo was a company that I was CEO of in 2001. And the best advice that I could give for that is don't ever be CEO of a company in 2001. We had a database. It was a piece of software that would convert a user's IP address into an actual physical location. So given the person's IP address, you don't know who they are, but you can say they're in Grand Rapids, Michigan, or they're in, Bangkok or whatever. And there are some interesting applications for that in terms of personalizing web experiences, customizing web content. So there's some security things that you can do with that, and there's just overall general marketing type stuff that it's useful for. And we try to sell this to other businesses, websites, security companies. But the fact of the matter is, 2001 was just an awful year, and the stock market had imploded. It started imploding, I think, in April 2000. By 2001, it was just a disaster everywhere. Nobody wanted to talk to anybody. Everyone was locked down. We were trying to raise capital, which was a virtual impossibility. And all of this was just a disaster even before September 11th happened. And then, of course, I was actually at an investor conference on September 11th, pitching NetGeo to investors. And as you might imagine, there was nobody in the room. Everyone was actually out in the hallway looking at the monitor. Which was tragic in many different ways. And actually, to this day, I kind of regret even having done it. I guess I felt some sort of a duty and obligation. I'm the CEO. I'm supposed to stand up here. I'm supposed to present this company. So I did it anyway. Although in retrospect, I should have just said, you know what, this is just not a day for talking about business. So the company ended up eventually getting acquired like 6 years later by a competitor. But so that was a tough. Now NextTag's a much better story. NextTag started off life as a comparison shopping engine, and we all kind of know what that is. And this was back in 1998. And so, strangely, I actually worked at NextTag twice, once before NetGeo and then once after it. And before NetGeo, they started off as a comparison shopping site, and then they tried to become a B2B website. So they were going to build, it might be difficult to remember, but back in the bubble days, B2B exchanges were huge. Commerce One and what's the name that began with an A? There was another company that began with an A. It went public, and when they were working
Alibaba?
Once again?
Was it Alibaba?
No, it was no, I can't remember. In any event, we were trying all this different B2B stuff, and nothing was sticking. And then when the market collapsed, right before I went to NetGeo, everything was everything was scaled back. So in the interim, AdWords happened, and AdWords provided a vehicle for essentially driving traffic to the comparison shopping site. So the thing that was actually buried in the beginning, the original idea that was then buried, was resurrected, which might sound familiar, and they started purchasing traffic from AdWords and driving traffic to the comparison shopping site. And then I joined the company once again, and the mortgage thing was happening at that point. So the internet bubble was gone, and now the housing bubble was kicking up, and everyone wanted to buy mortgages. And so I actually started up their mortgage lead business. And so NextTag is a B2C website. So consumers go to it, and they either shop for products or mortgages or loans or whatever it is that they do. But the reason that it was successful, I think, is because they had I would almost call it well, I wouldn't say it's a B2B strategy, but essentially they were able to acquire all the traffic with Google's AdWords, and then they were able to monetize it. They essentially took the low-cost traffic, and they were able to convert it into high-value traffic by running it through their comparison shopping filter. And then once you make a fraction of a penny on a transaction, once you're ROI positive, even if it's 1%, if you can do that a million times a day, well, not a day, but a few million times a month, then you're off to the races.
So it was a perfect arbitrage situation, basically.
So the word arbitrage is one that when we were there, the executive team didn't like hearing, but that's what it was.
Huh. And why were they negative on the term?
Well, because pure arbitrage means that you're basically exploiting price differences between two markets.
Mm-hmm.
And you're buying the traffic for low and you're selling it for high. However, I think that there was a reasonable argument to be made that the value of the traffic was increased as it passed through NextTag's hands. Because you might be searching for a Canon digital camera, and so you go to Google and you pump it in, and you see a NextTag ad and you click on it. When you arrive on the page at NextTag, though, you're presented with all of the sellers, as well as technical information about the camera, a picture, the price and the tax and the shipping and all that kind of stuff. And this has value. So when that user then clicks off NextTags and goes to the seller's page, they convert better because they feel like they've done their homework. They've done their shopping. I've looked at all these sites. I know what the prices are. I looked at the sellers. And so they're ready to buy. And I think there's a lot of value in that, which is why I think they've done well.
So in both of those, NetGeo and NextTag, there seems to be a lesson in just staying around. I would maybe say I would call it perseverance too, but would you say that's accurate?
Well, I would say that I would say, yeah, absolutely. I think that not every company is going to succeed, as we all know. And at some point, I think that you have that if you're an executive of a company, you have to decide whether or not this is actually going to happen. And that decision can be based on any number of different factors. However, timing is extremely important. And to the extent that a company can make itself conspicuous and be around for long enough that they can take advantage of opportunities that present themselves, then obviously that plays to their favor. So for NextTag, they had raised, I think it was $11 million in venture capital money during the bubble time. And a lot of that was depleted, but they were smart enough to ratchet down their costs, so they didn't drive the company into the ground. They scaled it down, they cut the burn, and they got it to a point where they were able to eventually figure out what it is they had in their arsenal that was of value. And then they had the fortune of being able to find the AdSense opportunity that enabled them to exploit that thing of value. So for Surf Canyon, it's not an entirely different story, although at least for the moment, perhaps on a different scale. We have a vision of something that we believe is very valuable, but search is a tough marketplace. There are a lot of, we all know about what happened with Microsoft and Yahoo, and there are some big players out there. When I think of all the different things that have happened in search over the last 3.5 years, there's been a tremendous amount of turmoil. And now is an exciting time because it feels like It feels like Microsoft is really going after it hard, which is great. With the launch of Bing, there's a sense in the marketplace that there's this renewed excitement and competition. And fortunately, we're still around. So I don't know what, if anything, will come of it. I think that our value is as strong today as it has ever been. But if we had burnt through all of our cash a year ago, then we wouldn't even be in the running right now. So
when you were launching the mortgage product in NextTag, how were you evaluated there? Did you just have a budget you were allowed to spend on AdWords, and you had to prove that it was going to be valuable to the company?
So you're talking about me personally? How was I evaluated?
Well, how did you approach launching that project and making sure it was successful? Getting traction for that particular segment.
So that's a good question. So a lot of credit goes to the team at NextTag for sort of realizing what it is that they did well. And I mentioned that they were a comparison shopping site, but really what they were is they had a tremendous skill in purchasing keywords, AdWords. They had developed this competence in doing it, and it was sort of a fire hose that they can then fire in any direction. So initially they were purchasing keywords for products, because electronics, because that was very hot. They were making some money. And so now the question, so somebody stepped back at some point and said, what do we have here? And we have this engine where we can, where we can generate leads and then sell leads. Now, for comparison shopping, those leads might be expressed as clicks, whereas in mortgages, they're completed forms where users will put in information about their mortgage needs. But to a certain extent, it's a very similar thing. So in 2003, there wasn't really any question as to whether or not mortgage leads would be big, because there were other businesses who were being very successful, and all you had to do was call up a few mortgage banks and you ask them, are you interested in mortgage leads? And the answer was a resounding yes. So if you can get the leads, we'll buy the leads. And so at that point, it was just a question of trying to figure out, can we procure those leads? And so if you're going to start a mortgage lead business from scratch, well, that's a tough proposition, because there's a chicken and egg problem you've got, because you can't sell leads until you can buy leads, and in a lot of cases you can't buy leads until you have some money from selling leads. However, if you've got a comparison shopping business which is already running and is producing a lot of profit, then that can be redirected. You can essentially reinvest those profits in getting your mortgage business off the ground. So, which is what they did. So step number one was to figure out, can we buy AdWords and produce a serious volume of traffic that we can generate, a mortgage-related traffic that we can generate to our site into a form that would produce that will produce leads. So that experiment was run, and the answer was quickly yes. And then the next part, which is the part that I was most involved with, was, now that we have these leads, to whom do we sell them? And for how much do we sell them? And so I went out and contacted the mortgage banks and put together the deals to acquire the leads.
Just something else that occurred to me. It seems like there's a lesson in both Surf Cannon and NextTag about picking the right market. I mean, pretty much you're saying mortgages were a ridiculous market in that time period, and that obviously helped to be successful. And in search, both of us are in that market, and it's a ridiculous market, and hopefully that'll contribute to the success. Do you believe in that?
I'm not so sure. And it's interesting that you asked that question, because just today I read a post on VentureBeat about the motivations for entrepreneurs. And it's entirely possible that I'm in the minority, because I was a little surprised that there was 3/4 said that the motivation was to make a lot of money. And I think that people who start companies certainly want to do well. They want to have economic success, as of course do we. I mean, um, however, my motivation for starting Surf Canyon was a little bit different. I felt like there was, I felt like the idea was compelling, that it would just be an interesting thing to do that could deliver a lot of value. Um, I sometimes wonder how serial entrepreneurs, and maybe you could, with your research, you could dig into this. How do they come about deciding what companies they're going to start and when? I think a lot of people, and this is just a speculation, but they might just look at the different markets out there. Which markets? I mean, they essentially do like a business school analysis, and they say what markets are growing, which markets are fragmented. Where is there opportunities to either copy someone or do something close and add a little bit of incremental value? Where do the regulations favor doing X, Y, Z, and so forth? And then they all pick a market, and then they'll go for it. I think a lot of people kind of chase the wave. iPhone apps hot, right? So let's figure out what's a good iPhone app that we can make. Games, casual games apparently are huge. Zynga is apparently killing it. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of companies building casual games. I don't know how much I could talk about the genesis of NextTag, although I was there very early on. That was a crazy time, 1998. So maybe it's difficult to draw the comparison because it was just so crazy, and there's so many companies, and I mean, almost when I think back, it's almost like even difficult to believe that it even happened. It was so insane. But the genesis of Surf Canyon was one of. So for a number of years, I wanted to start a company, but didn't really have an idea as to what. And I saw what I felt was a deficiency in a product that I felt like I had a strategy to improve it. And I guess it was as simple as that. It happened to be search, but it wasn't search because I felt search was like so great. I mean, it could have been other things, but I didn't choose to build a search company because I thought there was something particular about that marketplace that would lend itself to building a company. In fact, if you would do the analysis, it might lead you away from doing anything with search. I mean, realistically, search. Eric Schoenfeld at TechCrunch called it search the most interesting fight on the internet, and I think search is fascinating. I think it's the heart of the internet, and everything runs through search. But it is a really hard field to be in for just any number of different reasons. There are dominant players. They aren't 800-pound gorillas; they're 8,000-pound gorillas. Getting people to change their habits is extremely difficult. The science of search is I don't know if you'd call it mature, but it certainly is. The opportunities to make incremental improvements are tough. So my a business school case analysis of the opportunities in search entrepreneurialism might have led me to not start Surf Canyon, but I didn't look at it that way. So we did it.
So you mentioned business school. You went to Harvard, right? Business school.
Actually, can I interrupt? Can I interrupt you real quickly?
Yeah.
You started a search company. What was? I know you want to talk to me, but maybe you want to chime in and say, what was your motivation for starting DuckDuckGo?
I mean, it's pretty much what you said is pretty much exactly mirrors what my motivation was. I mean, I saw it's pretty much exactly what you said. I saw a way that I thought I could improve it, and I could see the path to doing so, and I just thought it was interesting, and I had no real I actually built the first prototype. Just had no intention of even a company around anything. I just was messing around because I thought I saw some ways it could be improved, and I just wanted to see if I could explore it myself. And then once I built it, I thought, wow, it really is improved. So I'm gonna just keep going. And then eventually, I turned it into what it is today. But it wasn't even a company idea to start with.
Yeah, I think that I just thought of how I could have shortened my long-winded response to your question a bit. And it's a product approach versus a business approach. And I think that if you look at the business approach, you'll look at the market, the players, the opportunities to build a business, that sort of thing, and make your decisions based on that. Whereas we both took a product approach. We looked at the products out there and we thought, this is something we can make better.
So you actually have a business school degree, right? From
I do.
Harvard, and then from
Are you gonna suggest that they come and reclaim it?
and you went to MIT undergrad. What, right? Well, what I was going to suggest was, how much do you feel this your education has played into your ability to, have these goals and run your company and stuff? Do you feel that it influenced you, or just completely unrelated part of your life?
I think it's had a big influence, a big impact. Especially MIT. I've worked at a number of different startups and a number of different companies, doing various different business-related things after business school. One of the things that I really like about Surf Canyon is the way it has afforded me an opportunity to get back to my nerd core, because in other. So we were talking about NextTag previously, when I was doing business development relationships and selling mortgage leads. All that was great and everything, but I'm fascinated by data, which probably sounds awful. I mean, but I love numbers, and I get a big thrill out of taking this. Search is particularly fascinating in this way, and you probably know this. I'm sure you know this, in that there's such an enormous quantity of information everywhere. Not just like the information that you're searching, but what the users are doing, what they're inputting, the queries, the results, their clicks, the ads, and everything, which affords a tremendous opportunity for data analysis, data mining, and trying to find ways to optimize. And that really is, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily I mean, I loved that before MIT, but I think MIT gave me a lot of tools to be able to do things like that. And it's kind of fun. It's funny because, I mean, how many jobs do you know of where you calculate T-scores? And I took stats in college, but I've had to brush up because I have to admit it's been almost 20 years, and I didn't remember how to do a T-score analysis, and but that's what we're doing. That's one of the things we're doing today, and so that's interesting. Business school, I think that more than anything else, it kind of opened up my eyes to the rest of the world. Because when you're at MIT, as you know, because you were there, it's very focused in on the tech, and it's easy to get lost in your circuit board or your programming language or whatever it is that you're doing in the lab, and not kind of take a step back and realize the rest of the world around you. And my first job after MIT was at Compaq Computers, and I was an engineer, and I did system level debugging, and it was hardcore engineering stuff. I had no scope and a logic analyzer, and I soldered caps on the bus and did bus timing and all that kind of stuff, right? And when I went to business school, it really kind of helped me to understand that the whole world outside the lab. And so I think that from now, Surf Canyon is pretty tech heavy. We do a lot of data analysis, and I love all that stuff. But I think that it's certainly very helpful to kind of have a bigger vision of the world and what's taking place. And certainly when it comes to raising capital and working with other companies, finding ways to collaborate, putting together a vision, all that kind of stuff, it's very helpful.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say about getting traction, getting users, or other types of advice?
Listening to what people tell you. And I know that sounds like it sounds trite, and it is a bit trite, and it's also quite a bit obvious, but it's also very hard to do. And it's hard because when you're starting a company and you have a new product and you're showing it to people, invariably you're going to get a whole spectrum of feedback. And first of all, it's very difficult to get honest feedback from people, so you almost have to pull it out of them. Anonymous people can leave you a lot of frank feedback, but sometimes it's very difficult you can't have an exchange, and it's difficult to get to the nuggets. And the other thing is that not all the feedback is good feedback. Some people might just be wrong. You could be wrong. Your product might not be interesting. There might not be value there. Obviously, if you're starting a company, you have to believe there is. And when somebody tells you that there isn't, how many people have to say that there's no value there, or this is useless, or it doesn't work, before that you decide that they're right and you're not right? So when people are giving you that feedback, I think the big challenge is to sort of accumulate all of it, try to find some trends, and try to make some adjustments. And then try to make some assessments of, what can you do to make it better? How can you fix this? How can you fix that? And we've been somewhat obsessive about trying to track down user opinion, user feedback. Someone sends me an email about something, I always reply. I say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Give us more information. Tell me. A lot of people will follow up and they'll give you some thoughts. A lot of people won't. But ultimately, what you end up with is just a mountain of fragments of data, because it's very difficult to get a full picture from anyone. So you can just get the amount of fragments of data, and you have to do like your own data mining through it, and you have to decide, what is the common thread here? Are there any common threads here? Is there something that's broken? Are they wrong? Am I wrong? Are we both right, but I just haven't found the right way to communicate what it is that's happening? So that's another tough thing. Figuring out the words to use to kind of explain what it is that you're doing so that you can get the right feedback. That's a challenge, especially if you're doing something that's new. A lot of words, what we've come to learn is a lot of words come with pre-baked in meaning. And when you use them, even though you might use them together with other words, they come charged already. So one of the things that we used to call Surf Canyon was real-time personalization, which is really what it is. However, the word personalization means something in search, and as soon as you use that word, people say, okay, I know what that is. And even if it's not you, it's tough to get them to come back. The word real-time is also very tough, because real-time is a little bit abused. So it's actually pretty much always abused, because the technical definition of real-time means that it happens at a certain pre-specified time. What people assume that it means is that it happens immediately, right? So this is like a real-time conversation. So as soon as I say it, you hear, right? But how it gets abused is that anything that happens like generally at some point in the somewhat near term, and so that's tough. So re-ranking is tough. All search companies re-rank at some point along the line. So if you say we re-rank, that means nothing. If you say you improve relevancy, well, that doesn't mean anything either, because there isn't a search company on the planet that does not improve relevancy. Use words. So we were using words like instantaneous reordering or continuous reordering of results, which is, how much different is that from, real-time re-ranking? Well, not that much, but they're just different words that haven't been used before necessarily in this context. So at least when you say them, people don't already assume that it's something that it's not. So maybe that's helpful.
Very. So thank you very much for doing this.
It's my pleasure.